Hi, everybody. I'm Caren Loebel-Fried, and I'm here with my new friend, Kikuo Johnson, and we're really
Hello.
excited to be here, part of Hawaii Book and Music Festival. I'm reporting from Volcano, Hawaii. Kikuo,
I-
where are you?
I'm here in Brooklyn, longing to be in Hawaii. But yeah, I'm here in my studio in Brooklyn. I spend most of the year out here, but I do spend about a month in Hawaii every year. So I can't wait to get back.
Yay, that'll be great. So I guess I'll just launch right in. The way we set this up today is we're going to be each taking turns sharing about our work and different parts of our work. And then at the end, we're going to, and a little bit in between. And then at the end, we're going to come together and have a conversation about how our work is similar and things that we're interested in and different things like that. So just to give you all an idea of what to expect. So I'm going to look at my share screen and launch. Okay, so my name is Caren Loebel-Fried, and I'm an artist and an author. And as I said, I'm from Volcano. I started off doing mostly books that were based on Hawaiian culture and legends, but I was mostly interested in the relationship between humans and their environment and how people make use of their environment and how people maintain and support and conserve their natural resources. So I'm trying to advance. There we go. I got really interested in natural science and using art and stories to promote awareness of conservation. So I did this work with Conservation Council for Hawaii, and it's a Hawaiian monk seal. And it was fun because this wonderful monk seal was at the Waikiki Aquarium. He had actually been saved because he could no longer live in the wild. His name is Ho'ailona. So it was a lot of fun to hang out with him and sketch from him live. I also worked with Kilauea Point, that's on Kauai, and representing the different animals that occur there, and of course the lighthouse. So that's been really fun. They use it on merchandise and T-shirts and stuff like that. So continuing that idea of using art as a way of bringing awareness to conservation issues. This is the alala, the last alala couple that occurred in the wild, because now they're only they're being preserved and they're actually reproducing in a place that I know of, Keaho Bird Conservation Center. And they are on Big Island. But these were the last couple, and it was such a beautiful photograph that Jack Jeffrey took that I partnered with him and used this photo, and it was part of a bird conservation effort that was being done. And this was also a Jack Jeffrey photo. It's the wandering tattler, and I wanted to tell the story of them. They're incredible voyagers. They go really far to get food and to do their reproduction, but they do occur in Hawaii, and you'll see them, and they're quite wonderful. But I loved this posture because it sort of showed an Oahu at rest, almost in a yoga pose. And I love the idea of thinking the reality that each bird or each animal like us is an individual. And I really try to get that across, like get the personality or the mood of the individual species when I'm doing art. And this is the palila, and there are hardly any palila left. And they're wonderful birds, and they're on the Big Island. And there's an effort now that's being made to bring awareness to palila and how much mosquitoes are affecting the forest birds in Hawaii. So most recently, I was doing research on Oahu at Hanauma Bay because I'm going to be working with Friends of Hanauma Bay to create art for them and to celebrate the beautiful place and all the species that occur there. And so many tourists go there, but I don't know if everybody's aware of how special it is, how incredible it is. So I was hosted by a wonderful woman named Anka. Thank you, Anka. And I came home with an ear infection. But if I act a little fuzzy, just understand that that's what's going on. But anyway, I'm thrilled to be working with them. But I do a lot of research for all of my work. And something happened to me several years ago where I became aware of albatrosses. And I just became obsessed with them. I had to find a way to be with them. So I found a way to get to Midway Atoll, which is all the way at the end of the northwestern Hawaiian chain, Papahana Mokuakea. And there I was part of a team that counted all of the nests on Midway. And since there were over 500,000 nests, it was quite a big job. I was also working on art for US Fish and Wildlife Service. And this was the art that I created, and it brings out the human history and all the different kinds, or many of the different kinds of wildlife that occur there, and also both the American history there and also the Hawaiian history. And I really wanted to show how we're working now. We changed it so much and made it so difficult for the wildlife there. But now there's real efforts to restore the environment. And that connection between environment and wildlife is really important to me to bring out in my work. So what followed from that was the book, A Perfect Day for an Albatross, that tells the story of this wonderful albatross named Maui, which means calm, and how albatrosses reach down and grab squid from the water. And they have a wonderful dance. And it's very meaningful and important to them because they actually choose their life mate by dancing. Not that different than some of us. I got interested in the idea of conservation and extinction. So this is the Hawai'i o'o, and this is an extinct bird, such a beautiful bird. After I did this art, I was working with Marjorie Ziegler, and we created this book, Manu, the Boy Who Loved Birds. And I'm going to be talking about that in the next section. But right now, I just want to say there are many ways to tell graphic stories, and I'm really excited about Kikuo sharing with us some of his work. Take it away, Kikuo.
Thanks so much, Caren. That was awesome. So cool to see both the beautiful images and the field work. Blows my mind. It's so cool that you found a way to like combine graphic storytelling and like just being immersed in Maui. It's a long time fantasy of mine to go to the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. Probably never make it, but so cool. So awesome to see that. So also, and that also is one reason I'm so happy to be paired with you today. I feel like besides just working on picture books and comic books and graphic art, in a very, very kind of not official way, I just share a passion for that as well. And I'll show a little bit of how that kind of comes up in my art.
I just want to say I wasn't aware until we were paired together that I was aware of your work before this through the covers that you've done for New Yorker magazine. Oh. And I've loved your work for years. And then here we were together. So I'm delighted to be working with you, not only for that reason, but was a wonderful surprise.
Awesome. Right on. Well, let me see if I can get screen share to work as well. That was an awesome presentation. And yeah, I think that worked. And my slides got thrown out of order a little bit, unfortunately, but I'll start here. And this is actually where all my life I'd love to draw. I grew up reading comic books at a young age. And by the time I was in high school, I kind of wanted to branch out, get into other kinds of art. And, growing up on Maui in Makawao, like the art that, I didn't go to museums. I didn't have anything around. I had comic books and I had the like kind of landscape painting scene that, especially during the 90s, got huge, and like amazing painters out there. Shout out to Eddie Float, one of my favorite painters to this day, amazing watercolor artist, and the whole landscape scene up there. And so by the time I was in college and high school, I had my box easel, and I'd go out into the pineapple fields. Picking pineapple was my first job in life. And And at the time I was watching kind of the, agricultural industry on Maui disappear. And I thought I would kind of paint this like rustic, here's another kind of one of my paintings, just kind of showing the dilapidated pineapple equipment out there, not knowing that you can't even see like this. There's very few places to see this stuff anymore on Maui at this point, but this would have been like 2002-ish. And I did that for a while in college, and I finally realized, like my junior in college, it's like, you know what I really want to do, the reason I started drawing and my passion with drawing always was to tell stories and use my imagination. As much as I enjoyed going out into the fields, I wanted to write comic books. And I returned to that. And while I was in college, I started this book, which is called Night Fisher. And it's a semi-autobiographical story about a coming of age story about boys in high school on Maui. The action in the book takes place maybe around the turn of the century, and like from the 90s to the 2000s. And I remember when I was writing this book, like I really wanted to, I felt like the Maui that I knew and that I grew up in was never represented on TV or in books in the way that I was familiar with. So that was kind of like, I felt like a sense of purpose when working on it. So I worked on it for 3 years, and just, pre-social media days, nobody saw it. And I finally sent it to my favorite comic book publisher, and they liked it and they published it, and it got some good reviews, and it got translated into a few different languages, got to travel the world a little bit. And unexpectedly, it also got me a career in illustration, which was not something I was necessarily chasing directly, but what happened was a lot of magazines that would see the book or hear reviews of the book would call me, and they'd be like, do you want to do this illustration for us? My first professional job ever was drawing a set of sex positions for Men's Health magazine. I won't bore you with that, but or maybe I should have bored you with that. Maybe that's more interesting. My second ever illustration was for the New Yorker. This is like a car chase scene from like a 2006 issue of the New Yorker. It was a double page spread. It just went across the top of a spread. And as I'm sure a lot of illustrators know, like the best promotion as an illustrator is a good job. And so this was in a major magazine, and I just got really lucky right out, and have been working with the New Yorker ever since. But over time, doing editorial illustration, kind of that mercenary freelance life, my passion came back to me, and I wanted to get back to writing stories and doing comics. And so in 2012, I think we released this book, The Shark King. And it is a kind of retelling of the classic Nanaue story, also known as like the Shark Man of Waipio, classic Hawaiian story. And we did it in comics form. The editor of this is a woman named Françoise Mouly, who is also an art editor at the New Yorker. And her idea is that kids should have books that they can, or there's so many great kids books out there. One type of kids book that she had an idea for is books that kids can read to themselves instead of having books that parents read to kids. And that's a great way to learn to read, because she learned to read through comics. I know I learned to read through comics, and her husband, Art Spiegelman, also learned to read through comics. So that was kind of like the thing. So here's some pages from The Shark King. After working with Françoise on this, she controls the covers at the New Yorker, and I was hoping at some point I might be able to do a cover for her. Submitted sketches for 4 years, and finally ended up getting my work on the cover of the New Yorker. This is not the first one. This one was from 2008, but it's a really kind of another way to explore telling pictures with stories, which was always been my passion. And here you see, I'll zoom in here. This was in 2018, and I just remember every time I would leave the city. I remember once I went hiking upstate New York and I saw Confederate flags, and it was just wild to see that in New York City. And so this culture clash of urban versus rural and rural versus urban just seemed like something that I wanted to try to capture. And believe it or not, I have seen trucks very similar to this out in the wild. Also, though, just on a side note, when I was drawing this, I was actually there's probably places that look like this in upstate, but I was actually thinking about the view of Haleakala for those people in Maui right now from like La Perouse. Obviously not the pine trees, but like when you're looking up and the way that the clouds sit right there. Anyway, side note. So in addition to the New Yorker covers, this year I finally sat down and I wrote my third graphic novel, No One Else. I think it's the best thing I've ever done. I'm really excited about it. Again, it takes place in Hawaii. You know, if I'm gonna sit for 2 years and draw something and imagine myself in a place, no place I'd rather be than Maui. So this gives you a little flavor of what's inside the book. For those again familiar with Maui, that's the Ho'okipa Lookout. Yeah, and this is coming out in November. And I'm just thrilled to be talking about it. And and I will be home in December 10th at Boss Bookstore signing these. But aside from all that, like I'm excited to talk about the nitty gritty of how we make these things and everything else with you, Caren. Oh, let me end the screen share here. Stop share.
Oh, that was great. That was so interesting. I didn't know that. I mean, I kind of grew up on comics too. And Art Spiegelman of Mouse fame.
Yeah. So Art Spiegelman, you know, probably most people are familiar with the book, but it was kind of the first graphic novel, helped in 1986 transition comics, which at that time were still so looked down upon and kind of just not accepted as an art form. And his book in 86 transitioned it, and Francoise actually published the book and serialized it, and they're also married, and also she's my editor at the New Yorker. So
that's great. Amazing. Yeah, I mean, that Mouse, it's about the Holocaust, in case anybody isn't familiar with it. I mean, it's a very serious story, and it features mice that sort of are the humans. They're the characters telling the story, and it's incredible. It's such a powerful story. And here it was graphically told. And I actually lived in New York City at the time when it came out and was in a band. And so we sort of have switched places, right? But that's really cool. That's a cool connection. Thank you for that introduction. It was really wonderful to see your early work and how you transition and how quickly you really have risen to the occasion of having this beautiful platform to use your imagination, because you have a wonderful imagination. And I've been blown away in your work by how much you tell a story just in the subtleties within each frame. It's very cool. We're going to talk about that more because I have questions for you about how you do that. It's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay. Now I'm going to go back to my screen share and see if I can go to the right. Well, there we go. Here's the Manu cover. Hope this is right. Let's give this a try. So I hope everybody sees the Manu book cover. So this is my latest book. It's with University of Hawaii Press. And excuse me. This storybook is actually based on a real story, a real boy. His dad was on the board of Conservation Council for Hawaii, and Marjorie Ziegler's real passion, her vision from the first day that I met her. She was the Conservation Council for Hawaii's director. She wanted people to realize that dinosaurs aren't the only things that went extinct. We have extinction all around us. And this dad named his boy after the extinct o'o bird, because he really hoped that his son would grow up and understand the relationship between animals and plants, and that when things go extinct, it really is forever. And I worked on this poster with Conservation Council for Hawaii after that, and it was showing this boy, Manu, and he has this connection with the o'o bird. So that was a lot of fun, but I knew that I needed to do more with this story. It was so compelling. So I began to research and create a story around this little nugget. And I started to do research. So at Bishop Museum, I was in the vertebrate zoology section. I went a bunch of times and hung out with the beautiful o'o bird skins. It's pretty powerful to be in a place and to be with the remains of this extinct bird. And I know a bunch of people that were part of the last surveys on Kauai where the remaining o'o species, there were 4 species of o'o, the remaining o'o, the only one left, they actually used recorded song and lured the one last bird to come. And I also, at the museum, researched the cultural aspects of it. So visiting the actual proper museum, and if you go to Oahu, you can go to Bishop Museum and you can see this beautiful feather work there. So Manu he grew up in the city, he's from Honolulu, and he loves birds. His name, Manu, means bird. And it's pretty cool. Through graphic work like ours, telling story through art, you can show things without saying them. So I wanted to show a really good relationship, a nice relationship that this dad and son have. So his dad helped Manu learn about this bird that he was so curious about. Because one day Manu says, "Why did you name me after an extinct bird?" So Manu gets to hear the song of the o'o. And if you go online, you can actually hear it. It's unbelievable. They are wonderful songsters. So Manu is fascinated by these birds. Then he goes with his class to the Bishop Museum. And this is the actual cloak that was made with o'o feathers, o'o and iiwi, I think. The red feathers would be from the iiwi bird, but that's a lot of feathers that go into that. So I was able to show in the book, Manu visiting this, the museum with his class. And it's confusing to him because he's proud of his culture and he loves the work, but he just wonders where did all the o'o birds go? So then he starts to have dreams. And that's another cool thing about telling stories is you can use dreams to show things that you might not have a way of showing. So in this book, he has a direct relationship with this bird. And later on, he even flies with the bird. He becomes an o'o bird in his dream because he feels so connected. But he learns about how the feathers were collected. And then he and his mom have a really nice relationship. So he wakes up from this nightmare and she comforts him. And he really wants to see, he asks her if he'll ever get to see a living bird of the forest, because where he lives on Oahu, it's all introduced birds. You know, when we live in the city or just at sea level, we don't really have the opportunity to see native birds anymore. They've all been driven up the mountains in Hawaii because of mostly mosquitoes and habitat loss and all that. So I wanted to show the bird kind of looking over his shoulder. That's his dream bird, the o'o. So his family surprises him and brings him to the Big Island. And he learns about bird watching by hearing. So I don't know if you all have noticed, a lot of times you'll hear a bird before you see it. And if you learn to identify the bird's sound, then you know it's out there somewhere and maybe you'll be able to find it. Because usually with forest birds, they move very quickly and they're not so easy to see. So, and then his parents take him to the Keaho Conservation Center, Bird Conservation Center, and he gets to meet that palila and he sees a bunch of other birds as well. And then they take him up Mauna Kea to do some outplanting of koa trees. And it's very powerful to him because he makes that connection between the birds and the plants. And if you don't have the plants, then the wildlife can't exist. The birds need the plants for food, for habitat, and all of that. So he gets to actually do something that makes a difference, and that's really meaningful to him. And he flies. He dreams of flying. And this is another way that I was able to talk about how they flew, what their kind of style of flight was like. So that was really fun to get into that. In the back of the book, we included all kinds of natural science in a fun way, talking about what the birds eat and what they were like. And most important to me personally was being able to give the tools for people to know things that they can do to make a difference to help these birds, because it's really depressing when you think about extinction, and especially if you think, oh, it's going to happen, and you don't even want to really put any time into it because it's it can feel very inevitable. But I disagree, and I do believe that I know that there are things that we can do. So I see my books as a way of educating about that. So that's what I try to do. I try to create pictures that lure people in and convince them just that they just fall in love with these species and they want to do something to help them. We also we gave lots of cool information about the feather work in old Hawaii. And educational guides were created by a bunch of very wonderful people, and they're all available on my website for free. So they're for K through third grade. You can go ahead and get them. And by the way, I did notice that, Kikuo, about some of your early books, they're educational guides. I think that's so cool, that idea that, yeah, I mean, let's help teachers use books in the classroom. Let's help kids where they can just go ahead and enjoy reading without the help of parents. And the other thing that was so cool and so wonderful, Press created a Hawaiian language version with the help of Conservation Council for Hawaii. Blaine Namahana Tolentino tells the story in a Hawaiian way. It's not a direct translation from my telling of the story. So it's really exciting and very beautiful. So that was a wonderful thing that I was very thrilled with. So I kind of gave you the background, the origins of this book. And now I'm curious to hear from you, Kikuo, sort of what are the origins? How did you put No One Else together?
Yeah. Well, first, that was awesome. Also,
Yay.
highest possible recommendation. I can't wait to share this with. I'm bringing this back to Hawaii, and I have my friends Keikis. I can't wait to share that with them. But I have a question. Just hopefully this is not too off topic. Just watching that and thinking about all the amazing kind of bird conservatories. I don't know what the word would be. Conservation centers in Hawaii and in the islands. You know, a lot of the birds are captive and in nets and stuff to keep out the malaria, the mosquitoes you mentioned. And I know that we are right on the edge of a malaria vaccination for humans. Is there anything coming down the pipe for birds, or is that just the logistics of that? I just kind of
no, there's actually I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a lot of work that's being done on a similar kind of idea that would actually make the mosquitoes where they couldn't reproduce. So it's incredible work, and it really could save a lot of bird species that are right on the edge of going extinct. And there's a whole hui of organizations, a whole group of organizations that are trying to make this happen. So anybody that's interested can, if you look up American Bird Conservancy, you'll find information about that. But it's there's a lot of different work that's being done, but that's the idea of it. And yeah, and these conservation centers, they have the screens up. I mean, it's mostly to keep the birds in. I mean, they're intended to be reintroduced into the wild, and they keep trying with the alala. And there's a number of reasons why so far it still needs some tweaking. But that's the intention. It's not just to preserve them like a zoo or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, and the hope is that they can control the mosquitoes. But yeah, I mean, there you go.
Yeah,
that's the idea.
Yeah, I know we're supposed to talk about books here, but that is so interesting to me. And I was a little bird obsessed with especially in my younger days, and I visited the Makawao Conservation Center and saw the alalas there. And
cool.
I remember, to your point about extinction and just the power of that, I remember, growing up and reading about all the native birds in Hawaii, but having never been to the Big Island until as an adult. And I saw eel, And when I saw the eel and when I heard it cry, I felt like I was looking at a dinosaur. I knew they were still alive, but I just never thought I'd see one. And
Wow.
when I saw it, to your point about seeing those the skins of the o'o, it
Mhm.
is such a powerful emotional effect of seeing it and really hearing the sound of a eo in the wild. Just yeah, amazing.
Cool.
Um, and I know I'm supposed to talk about my book right now, but let me screen
Do
share.
it.
Let
I'm
me,
needing.
and I do want to share this watercolor, totally unrelated to my professional work, but this is a watercolor I did as a gift from my family, and this is the kolea that like
I
nests,
love
or I
that.
guess not nests, but like lives in our yard every winter. Comes from Alaska, and so just love. Those
That's
are my dad's.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank
Anyway,
you
so
for sharing that. I love it.
we both have the passion for the native birds. Um, so my new book, No One Else, um, it was a passion project. It was something that it was the book that I wanted to read. You know, I love comic books. I love reading comics. So much of comics, just like so much of movies these days, is franchises or genre material, sci-fi, fantasy. And the kind of books that I like and the kind of stories that I like are probably would be most best understood as like art house film or indie film with just human stories about adults with adult problems and facing problems in life. There's no fantasy or anything like that. It's not for kids. It is for intended for adults. And it was a script I started writing here in when I was actually briefly living in Cape Cod, and I imagined a whole story about a grieving family, and I noticed just in my own life and as my grandparents passed away, and in my friends' lives, I've noticed how those family deaths can in big and in very small ways like just change every single other dynamic in a family gets shifted in very big ways and very small ways. And I saw that as a kind of jumping off point for my story. And also I thought it had a lot of opportunity for something that would feel meaningful to me working on it for 2 years in isolation. But also a good opportunity for humor. I thought like there also could be some kind of, you know, dry, dark humor kind of in that milieu. So I started writing it, and when I first was writing the script, I was living in Cape Cod, and I kind of imagined it happening in Cape Cod. And it wasn't until I was home in Hawaii and sitting. This would have been like 2015. I was sitting in Wailuku, looking out over the valley, and looking at the giant plume of smoke hovering over Maui, and thinking, this is crazy. Like I grew up with these like sugarcane burns, and you know we used to call it Hawaiian snow growing up, and we'd get out to our car. People from Maui all remember this. You go out to your car, it's just covered in ash. And I remember being a kid on the playground and having like the ash rain down on us, and it was fun. It was weirdly fun when you're a kid. But as an adult looking out at this giant burn and this like mushroom cloud, it seemed insane. And I was like, this has got to stop at some point. Like, this is crazy. And sure enough, the next year was the last year that the burns were happening on Maui. And so I wish I had brought a slide of, sorry, so the idea so this is a page from No One Else. And kind of, it's a dream, another dream, a lot like Caren's book, as she mentioned, you know, great opportunity in an illustrated book to go into dreams and have a surreal scene. But this is a dream of a grandfather who, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, dies in the story. And this is his grandson's dream of him looking at in the sugarcane fields. And it was really sitting on that hill looking at the burn, and I started saying, what if this story all takes place on Maui? What if it all takes place like right here, right at the view I'm looking at? And that's when everything became real to me. I've heard like all the characters became real. I could see it all unfold. I know like I could stage it all, you know, with comics, because you have to draw every single scene. It helps to use a landscape that you know super well, so you can kind of do the staging from memory. And uh, yeah, and also just this feeling, especially the next year when sugarcane ended. You know, it's not like I ever had like a super strong affection for sugarcane. I know the way it destroyed the watershed on the east side of Maui and all those controversies as well. So it's not like I had this huge affection for sugarcane. And yet I grew up my entire life. Anytime you fly into the islands, it's this blanket of bright green, and that pioneer mill just being kind of the hearth, for better or worse, on the middle of the island. And I felt a deep sadness for this thing that I didn't really love. And that all is kind of this, that's kind of the central theme of the book, like mourning something that you never liked that much. And playing that for humor, but also I played it very straight. I think some people might not find the book funny at all, because I did at first it was a little jokier, and then I was like, no, play it straight. I played it so straight, I might have played the humor out of it. But that's the book in a nutshell. And there's three main characters. Here's the young grandson, and here's the grandson with his I showed this slide already, but here's the grandson with his uncle, having some shave ice, and then the mother, Charlene, who I guess I only have this scene of the back of her head here, not a great scene of her, but those are the three main characters, and it follows their story as they grieve the patriarch of the family, and it's a short little book. It's a novella, but yeah, I think that's all for now, and I think we're gonna, I'll hand it back to Caren. Let me end this screen share, and that's kind of the origin of that.
There's so much more to talk about in this book. And is that okay if I say
Sure.
to you?
Yeah,
I wrote to you, I think last night. I read it a few months ago, and then I reread it last night. It's an unbelievable story. And I laughed and I cried. I told you I laughed and I cried because I did. It's so well done, and it's just such an interesting story. And that's not even like how you succeed in telling it. Because to me, it's like it's one thing if you have a gift or a talent, and I know you work really hard to get ideas across. I mean, I assume you do. I hope you do.
Yeah, definitely. Ask my girlfriend. She'll tell you. She tells you I work too hard.
Yeah. But I think having a great story. I mean, there has to be some really good, solid content, and it's not fluff. I mean, this is like incredible, because to me, I felt so much for the mom in the story. And I mean, she is working so hard, and oh my goodness, it's insane. And it's so much stress, and she's taking care of her dad, the grandfather. But let me tell you something. When I saw, I'm a mom myself. When I saw that blanket, since we already know, I don't want to give anything away. The first read, I was like, oh no, this is not going to end well. But I also appreciate, I mean, the story goes through so many different, goes to so many different places and through so many emotions, and the characters are so solid. I mean, they're real living people to me, and these situations are so, they're so real. I mean, they're so relatable, and but it has a happy ending, and I so appreciate that. Because it's tough. It's a tough story. So well done. And this young boy, I mean, it's so cool when you have youngsters that sort of are the vehicle for stories.
Yeah,
I love that.
Oh, thank you so much, Caren. That not that many people have read the book yet. It's not out till November. And no. That's not what I don't think you did any spoilers or anything, but I only say that because I just appreciate that close reading so much. I really sincerely, that means so much to me to get your feedback, and hear that hopefully a lot of things are coming through. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you, because it's a great story. I hope everybody enjoys it. Definitely check it out. And I'm just going to say to you, we have questions, and we're noticing the questions, and we're going to, and thank you so much, everybody. We're going to get to the questions at the end. We'll definitely save some time. And right now I'm just going to go to our next section. And that is, we are going to share about our process. So let me just pull that up. That's the sketch. Okay, cool. All right. So Do you see one of the Bishop Museum and my sketch next to it, a Bishop Museum OO bird? Okay, cool. Okay,
Yep.
great. So like I was saying before, I do a lot of my research before I do anything. I mean, I'll write a story, but once I know my topic, I start to go into heavy research mode, which usually it's field work and talking to specialists. But in this case, when it was with a bird that's extinct, I couldn't go out in the field and see it. So I spent a lot of time at Bishop Museum and also talking to people that had been with this bird. And there's a number of people that are friends of mine that got to see the bird before it went extinct. But one thing, Thane Pratt, who was an amazing biologist and a really lovely person, he agreed to review all my sketches and just make sure I had gotten the bird right, gotten the posture right, gotten the personality right. And he's the kind of scientist where I can say bird's personality and he doesn't cringe. He says that himself. So it's like he was like the perfect guy for me to go to. And I really appreciated that. But he told me the OO bird was really feisty. And they were also very defensive, not like they would defend food, a food source. So they wouldn't necessarily defend a territory, but if it had food in it and there wasn't enough to go around, they would definitely defend that. So when I first showed him this sketch, which is now the final block print, I had the tail feathers down. And he said, the tail feathers need to be up. It kind of needs to show them a little bit more aggressively. So that was really cool, very subtle, but those kinds of hints were helpful in bringing the bird to life. So like I was saying before, I spent time at the Bishop Museum. So this is a collection of OO feathers that were used in things like this cape. So I used all of that research to do these drawings for the book. And when I do a book, I draw the whole thing. Page spreads are all drawings at the beginning, and then they get reviewed by people that really know their stuff. So, and then my process is block printing. I grew up with my mom. My mom's an artist. At the time when I was a kid, she like really little. When I was born, she was making block prints and teaching art in our basement. Before that, she taught art in public school in Orange, New Jersey, or East Orange, New Jersey. And I was born in Newark. I don't know if you're familiar with these places, but it was pretty tough school that she was teaching in. But anyway, she was doing block printing. So I followed in her footsteps and I started to do block prints because I was painting and I really wanted to do some kind of an art form that I could do multiples of so it could be more affordable for people. So all of my art, I mean, all of it is block prints. So they start like this. I actually brought one out so I could show you guys. It's made of 100% recycled rubber. So it's very floppy and easy to carve. So this is just showing how I work. Once I have my carved block, I roll the ink on, and then I place my paper on the inked block. And then I use a barren to transfer the ink onto the paper. And then I lift it up and there's my black and white print. And I do hand coloring after that. I was inspired to do the hand coloring by an exhibit of old biblical texts. It was all hand colored block prints. So this is a really ancient form of books. And I thought that it was such a beautiful way to tell stories. So I wanted to show you how the progression. So here's the drawing, and then here's what the block print looks like. And here's the final art that's colored in as a page spread. So you see how close the original looks to the final. Are your drawings like that, Kikuo? Do you go through a lot of changes?
Yeah. It's actually not so different. It's like kind of slowly coming into focus, kind of like over iterations.
Right. So when I went to Midway, it was cool because I didn't know at the time that I was going to be researching for a book, but I took a ton of videos because albatrosses are just so cool. So I just wanted to share with you what their courtship dance looks like and then show you a little piece of art where I tried to depict that. So anyway, here is, how can I get this to go? Will it go if I do this? Here we go. I don't, could you hear it as well? Were you able to get the audio on that?
Very faintly, very faintly.
Yeah, yeah. Oh boy, that's a big part of it, is there what they sound like, but they're just so cool. They're so into it.
Yeah.
So here was the I decided to do it like a kind of like a comic where you have the different frames and it shows their different postures and everything. So that was a lot of fun, and I'm hoping to do more of that in my next project because I love it. So I'm doing research for a new book on the Hawaiian petrel, and that actually ties into you, Kikuo. I did some research on Maui because these uwa'u, the Hawaiian petrel, they occur on Haleakala, but it was pretty wild. I mean, we had to helicopter in, and we camped on Mauna Loa, and here's what the uwa'u looks like. They're night birds, and they do a lot of their fishing for all these really cool bioluminescent creatures. And this next story is going to feature a girl, and her name is Makani, the wind, because these birds depend on the wind, and she's really into petrels, and they really need our help. So it's my chance to once again try to save the birds. So I got to volunteer with Pacific Rim Conservation. They are translocating bone-in petrels and also Hawaiian petrels and Newell's shearwaters, and those are the two endemic Hawaiian seabirds. And couldn't hold them because they're just so endangered, and I'm not trained to do that, and they don't have it permitted where I can do it. But it was very cool. On Midway also, there are tons of bone-in petrels. They've done a big comeback since rats were eradicated there. So back to you, Kikuo.
That is so cool. That is so cool. Those petrels, that's so cool. It looks like we're getting some questions. I'm gonna just do a real quick, like down and dirty, quick run through
your process, how you do it. I'm so curious. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me share the right screen here. Oops. Preview, share. Yep. Actually, let me start back here. So in terms of just how I draw stuff, in 2012, I started working 100% digital. And so when I see your working process, Caren, I can smell the ink, I can feel the paper. I'm so jealous. But for these, sometimes we were talking about earlier, sometimes these covers, I have, it's a matter of days, I have to turn them around. So digital became a much quicker process. So I start with a really, really loose sketch, and you can see this is a very simple drawing. I'm just trying to tell the story. Here's a robot and giving money to a human, the idea of automation. And and this will be one of like 5 sketches I submitted. And then I'll kind of keep working into it, adding color, all digital. You can see it's very, very rough and impressionistic, almost like a Monet. And then I'll make different changes, like here, oops, let me zoom out there. Here you can see I'll toggle between these. I was just like, I changed my robot designs. I wanted him to be like against the wall. And then when I get something rough like this, I'll turn the whole thing transparent. So what you see, that faint color you see in the background is the drawing that you just saw. And then now I'm doing these very fine controlled lines on top of it as a separate layer to kind of not so different than the black block print on top of the practical color that you're doing. And then I ended up changing the light source so that we focus on our protagonist a little bit more. And I came up with, instead of money, it's gears. Just another wah, 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 wah.
Hog in the wheel.
And and then there's the published version of the New Yorker. So that's my basic process of how I draw everything. I'll talk real quick about. No, you know what? I think that's good. We'll leave that, and let's talk about some of these questions that are rolling in for us. I like this question. Do you write and illustrate your books for a living, pay the bills, etc., or is it something you do as a hobby? And that I think that's a fair question and a good question for aspiring book artists. Do you wanna kick this one off or?
You go for it.
Okay. My books are they so there's like three things I do for in my career. I do editorial illustration, which is like for magazines and newspapers, and then I do advertising illustration, which is for, like I just did on my Instagram, you'll see like a ad campaign for Fanta, the soda. And then I also do comic books. And comic books are my passion. If I could only do comic books, I would just do that. Not a lot of people, to give you an example, Transformers 10 or whatever we're up to makes about $500 million in the box office. A cool art house film like P.T. Anderson and Daniel Day-Lewis' last film came out 2 years ago, that makes about $10 million in the box office. So take that ratio. Now consider a Batman comic only sells about 50,000 copies. So multiply that by $3 that it's selling for. It's a tiny industry. Nobody reads, like very few people read comics. And then I'm not P.T. Anderson, but I'm like, again, anything. So it's not a huge market. I do it because I absolutely love it. And it gives me a chance to, I think, actually put down on paper, use my craft and everything that I've been given to its fullest. And that's why I do it. And I love it. But it does not, the way I afford to have a Brooklyn, this is not entirely my space, but have a space in Brooklyn to work on this stuff is through doing advertising and other mercenary work.
Right. But you're still doing art, and just by, yeah.
Yeah. And I love it. I really enjoy that stuff as well. I don't have a hierarchy about design and art, and I think I love them all.
Right. And I also kind of see it all as storytelling, like telling different kinds of stories.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, like the research and the books there's not much money to be made in that, but all of the art I can then sell in galleries. And that's probably my main source. And then I do things like logos for the right kind of clients. When people come to me, it's either the right fit or not on both sides. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And one more thing I'll say for people that do want to do this, something encouraging. I'll say this, that every time a book comes out of mine, you do some press and you get out there, and that every big jump I've ever had in my illustration career for money has come after a book release, because it's so visible. It's like the best promoting tool. And so they feed each other, it's like you hear actors say you do one to pay your taxes, and then you do one for the love, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But definitely people get it. If you're compelled to make art for a living, you can't really decide how you're going to do it sometimes. And it does require doing a lot of different things. And I have to say, I'm like you, Kikuo, I'm really busy all the time working, but I love it. And I love all of it. So go for it. And you never know what's going to happen, how it's going to unfold, if you're able to. And it might mean having another job, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
I was a waiter for 11 years while I was cutting my teeth and building up a freelance client portfolio. So
Yeah.
Takes a while.
But
I wouldn't change a thing. Yeah.
Oh, and I see, my friend Evelyn, she posted a website that from Birds Not Mosquitoes. That's where you can go to get more information. Thanks, Evelyn. More information about the work that's being done to help forest birds in Hawaii.
Awesome. I think unfortunately we're right about time to pass this back to Roger. Do you want to try to quickly, do you have a 2-word answer for let's see, question?
You have another 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
We're good. Thank you, Roger.
Thanks,
Okay.
Roger. I'll take this one.
Good.
It says, Kikuo, unlike the Shark King, I noticed that no one else at Night Fisher isn't in color. Does working with limited colors affect the way you tell a story and your process, or perhaps does it not matter? It's a huge part of it. So Night Fisher's, it's a coming of age story, but it's also a crime noir story. So it made sense to be in black and white to me. It just made it was the right narrative choice. Shark King's in full color because it's a very colorful story. It's an action-packed kind of adventure comic, and I thought that should be in color. And in No One Else, it's mostly blue, but it's printed with a second ink color that's orange, and it actually has a symbolic meaning. So when I was drawing the fire of the sugarcane, I wanted something to give that added emotional punch. But if you read the book and you notice that there's not orange on every page, the orange doesn't render or describe the objects. It actually has a narrative meaning. It adds a subtext to the story. I'll leave that to readers. Do you want to talk about, or do we have another question? Do you have
Well, I love what you just said, and I do think that that's one thing that's really cool about telling stories with pictures, because you can do very subtle things that tell another part of the story. It's kind of like the art can support the narrative. And I did notice that about your work, and especially like going from the dream sequences to the live sequences, it would be a slight change in the color because it would be a little confusing, but reality can be confusing sometimes. Right. Am I the only one that feels that way? But I love the way you really subtly show that. And I also love your cinematic quality. I'm just throwing that in. Very, very cinematic. And that's another thing I always really loved about, I mean, to me, I start all my books as they're stills from a movie. All my books are movies to me. And I see your work as very, also like they're films to me. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, 100%. I think about it the same way. How about, would you respond to this, Caren? Your artwork reminds me of famous Japanese kirie, paper cutout, or artist Jiro Takidaira.
Cool. Thank you for that. I don't know. I'm not familiar with those artists. Thank you very much. I'll check them out.
We talked earlier about your, oh, sorry, not to cut you off, but you mentioned you do have like, I think you mentioned Lynn Ward and other of the great prints.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, early on. I mean, block prints and graphic stories that are told. I mean, they're really early ones. So it's at the 20s. Yeah, really old, and they're incredible. I mean, it's the perfect medium for telling these really serious stories. And they were essentially comics. It's very cool. So here's a question. Did you want to say something about that?
No,
okay.
No.
I'm moving along. Please forgive me for going quickly, but I just want to try to get to all these questions. What comes first to you, the story or the image? And how do you know what story to tell or how to tell it? I feel like I kind of answered that, but I had the same question myself. Okay, cool. How do you get your ideas? And does a picture, an image come first, or is there a story that you want to tell?
It's always different. It's always different I'll just speak on No One Else. A friend of mine told me a story. She was like, this is crazy. My friend's grandpa died and they like put the ashes under the sink with all the cleaning equipment.
Oh, that's where that came from.
and she told me, and then they buried him in the backyard. And she told me this story. This was like 10 years ago. She doesn't remember telling me this story. And it just stuck with me, and I was like, what would drive a family to react to a death that way? And that was actually the original seed. And
wow.
I thought that there was a lot of just that. So in this case, it started with narrative, and I find, back to Art Spiegelman. Art Spiegelman has a funny quote that's like, making art without a story, I'm misquoting it here, but making art without a story is like playing tennis without a net.
I love that.
I know, I feel that way. And so the story always guides every decision.
Yep, me too. And even like just a visual, not even like a book, but a piece of visual art, it's always a story to me.
Same, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Roger.
Hey, well, I want to thank you both very much. I wasn't quite sure how this would work, but it has worked beautifully. And I'm so glad. If you have friends who missed this and they want to see it again, it's going to be available probably tomorrow on the UH Manoa Better Tomorrow Speaker Series YouTube website. And then eventually it'll be edited into highlights and it'll be available on our website for at least a year. And I'll alert you to that. So again, thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation.
Yay.
Thank you so much. That was such a pleasure to meet you all.
Yes. Thank you so much, Roger. It's been really fun. Okay. Great to meet you, Kikuo. Good luck.
Yeah, you too.
See you all next time.